So I'm Kerry, Matre. This is
John
John DeLozier. We became colleagues maybe a year and a half ago when I started at Mandiant. You've been here much
7
longer.
years.
Much, so like 100 years.
Not in Mandiant consulting terms, but in security terms, yes.
Yes. But what we found when we met each other was first we said, no, this is the way security works. No, this is the way security works. We've had lots of dialogues about many security topics. One that we kind of dug into lately is metrics. And we bitched for probably an hour and a half about, no, this one sucks, that one sucks. And then we started talking about, well, why? What makes a good one? What are ones that we've seen actually help propel businesses forward? And here's the presentation you're going to get today of our constant conversations.
Right.
So what we've kind of identified is there's useful metrics, there's useless metrics, and then there's misleading metrics, and those are the worst. So what we're going to kind of walk you through is what are some bad ones, what are some good ones, how do you actually evaluate it? So.
Awesome.
You got to figure out the slide thingy. All right. Thank you. Did you want your water?
No,
Okay.
Thanks.
So the first thing we did when putting together this presentation is you go out and you Google and you say, what are good metrics? And you see all of these marketing articles, and I'm in marketing, so I can say this. Marketing articles that are kind of the same list of 10 over and over and over again. And so these are kind of ones that we pulled out. And so we kind of want to talk with you guys about, what do you think? Are these good or bad? So let's start out with the first one. Detected intrusion attempts. Good metric or bad? Show of hands, good? Okay, you guys already know.
All right, we're done.
Crap all, yeah. Love it. Okay, so with this one, let's pull this one apart. So you had 20,000 intrusion attempts yesterday. So what? How is that going to change anything in your business? Wow, that seems like a big number, but then tomorrow you get 100,000? Or you had 5? Something's broken. Okay, that one's actually useful. So that one just, there's no context. It assumes that everything in your organization stays the same. So how many people in this room have not changed a firewall rule or implemented any new security controls in the last, month?
ICS,
Right.
You don't need to answer this question.
Oh, okay. Got it. So some of these are good and bad. They all kind of serve a purpose. But that's enough on that one. So incident rates, severity levels, response times, time to remediation. What do you think about that one?
Oh, remediation time I think is useful, but it's actually the first one of these debates we had, I think.
Debate.
Yeah. Fights, it's good stuff. And it's one of those where by itself, it probably isn't good, and this is where Kerry was correct in her side of the argument, in that I took up the side of time to respond or time to remediate. Those are good measurements. But the caveat to that I wasn't including is only when combined with other measurements. And so,
right.
Yeah. So ultimately, she was right. I was wrong.
Right.
I'm used to that now.
Yes.
We've come a long way.
Only took a year and a half. No. Okay. And then like severity levels. Okay, well we had 5 critical issues yesterday. Okay, but how many did you miss? They're sort of, okay, you had 5, so what? So that's kind of one of the themes of this is the so what? What are you going to do with it? That sort of thing. Vulnerability patch response times. Okay, my IT team is taking too long. They're taking 6 months to patch something critical. Maybe they have something else going on. That metric by itself isn't really going to help me out. And then they might even have exceptions on why they're never going to patch it,
right.
Or they can't patch it.
Right.
So that's not the best.
Or when that metric's presented, it doesn't include all those systems that have a standing exception.
Right.
So it's like, oh, we get them all patched within 30 days. Well, but not any of the critical assets that have exceptions to patching.
Right, because those are hard. I'll let you take the next one.
Oh, yeah. So I love when you see like number of accounts with elevated or admin privileges. How do you feel about that metric? It's 5% of your environment versus 10% of your environment versus 60% of your environment. Or even worse, atomically, there's 10 people with elevated permissions. I don't know what that means. I don't know how many there should be. I don't know how many is the right answer. That metric does nothing for me.
Unless you're an insurance company And then the answer is 0. There's 0 admin. You know, they're getting much more in depth in reviewing organizations before they're going to insure them. So that's one where, unless you're 0, don't let them know. No. If everybody has admin privileges, of course, that's a terrible thing. But what's the right mix of 5%? 10%?
And it could be not just like user workstations. It could be apps, you know, power users, whatever. It's short answer. A lot of these are bad in isolation or can be used for bad things, not to, you know, give the answer key to the rest of these, but you know.
Yeah. The next one is kind of an implementation metric. So, okay, we just got this new SIM, we just got this new SOAR. How many feeds do we have going into it? How many playbooks have we created? This is a project management sort of KPI, but not security. So my example is, I was reviewing a SOC. And they just put in their SIM. They said, it's great, we've got 40 different types of feeds coming in to the SIM. And I said, wow, that sounds great. How many use cases have you deployed? 1. It was, you know, failed logins or something like that, failed password reset, failed logins, something like that. So while 40 feeds, 40, you know, areas of telemetry coming in sounds great, they only have 1 use case. So by itself doesn't mean anything.
Percentage of Active Directory deployed to the environment, or percentage of MFA, any of these deployment or coverage metrics, right? They're useful, but if I said I had 90% of the environment on the current version of Active Directory so that I'm able to theoretically run all the latest features, or if I said I had MFA deployed to 90% of the environment, that sounds great until you determine the crown jewels are still using single factor, or all your privileged admins are using single factor, or you still have enough of the environment on the old version, you haven't been able to upgrade to the effective Active Directory version you need, so ultimately the entire enterprise is being brought down by that 10%.
Yeah, or, you know, similar to this one is the, you know, we've got firewalls deployed covering 90% of the network, fantastic, but you don't have SSL decryption inspection turned on, and 80% of your traffic is encrypted. So you're not seeing what you think you're seeing. So again, another misleading metric. Next one, overall volume of data the business generates. This was an interesting one that I found on a list, and I'm like, what? Why would this one matter? This one actually matters for funding. You know, if you want to say, hey, the volume of data flowing through the business has doubled over the past 6 months, you might be able to use that metric to increase funding, increase spending on security, but that one's iffy to me. I kind of put it in the bad list with possibilities.
Yeah, I feel the same way about the next one. I hate like how much spam was blocked, except it's eye-catching and helps get you money sometimes. Helps make sure you get the license renewed on the expensive software. But a metric like that, you know, we block 10 million spam messages. Cool. What's that mean? So
that's a lot of our cool conversations. Cool, that's crap. Let's move on. Okay. We love metrics because we need to prove that what we're doing is awesome. We need to prove that we need more funding. We need to prove that we're becoming more efficient. We hate them for a lot more reasons. A lot of times they're time consuming to gather. If it takes 5 hours to collect a single metric, is it worth it? Sometimes you have to go to multiple systems, so systems might not be available. It's hard. It could be time consuming, so that's one thing. Number 2, they're not used. This is the most painful one. Everybody in here, how many times have you collected a metric that you spent 5 hours trying to find and then it wasn't used? Yeah, painful. Somebody else raised their hand that is on my team, and I apologize. So anyway, if there's no consumer of it, and it's not good. Sometimes the complete data is not available, and that goes back to that time consuming. If you have access to one system with the data and you get part of the story, but you don't have access to the more detailed story that would answer the follow-on questions, that's not going to help you either. So
it could even send you the wrong direction and, you know, kind of have you take the wrong action if it's not there, if the data is not available. As we move into like lead to unanswerable questions, you can have metrics that the downside of it is you then have the now what next, and you can't get there. And if that's the case, you really have to consider, is that helping? So I mean, that's another aspect of this. You can go through all this time. You may even have the group that wants to take action on it. You're not even falling into the not used category right up until the fact you realize the follow-on action is, so what do we do? Oh, I don't know.
Deer in headlights.
I hadn't thought that through. Like, I knew I needed to do something, but I didn't know what. Well, then maybe you should consider that as you're also looking at the metric. So.
Yeah. Relevancy is always changing. Again, our networks do not stay the same day to day. So our metrics are not going to stay the same day to day. Around, I don't know, December of last year, the most important metric was, oh my gosh, how many log4j exposures do I have? Where all am I using log4j? Now, if you had that in a report, it would be like, less important. So relevancy is always changing. And sometimes metrics tell the wrong story. They tell a story that you don't want to be told. Sometimes people feel embarrassed or they feel, make somebody look bad. And the answer to that is do not take metrics personally. So one thing that our CISO has done very, very well with metrics, with reporting, with any sort of intrusion, penetration testing, he's built a culture of don't take it personally. Like doing a red team investigation and them finding something is a good thing. Good metrics are going to lead to change. They're going to lead to the organization getting better. Take that on. Don't take that personally. Take that as we're making the business better. That's all I have on that one.
So as we start to talk about good metrics drive action, as we start to have this discussion, you and I, what should we look for to define as a good metric? It definitely should drive an action. There should be a so what moment in there. Ideally, it's apparent when you read the metric. If it's not going to do that, you're going to finish looking at this metric and say, we stopped 30% of all attacks. What the hell happened to the other 70%? Like, there should be an action. What are we going to do about that? If it doesn't have that, it's probably going to fall into the category of not so good metric, and we'll talk about several of those here soon. But
yeah, any good metric is going to drive action. It's going to drive change. It's going to make the organization better. Some metrics you get and you actually cannot act on them. Sometimes you need to continue gathering those because someday you might be able to act on them. So we'll give some examples of that in a moment. But okay, let's start at the beginning. So before you say, well, here's already my QBR report, here's already the stuff that I report up to the CISO every week, whatever. Let's start at the beginning. What goals are you trying to achieve? So the most prevalent in organizations is GRC, risk and compliance, regulation compliance, either for insurance coverage, for government regulations, for specific industry regulations. That's where a lot of metrics come from. You are not going to change those. Those are written into the regulations. I would argue that a lot of those are reporting rather than metrics. Reporting being this is activity that happened and it's not really driving change, but it's the checkbox. We'll put those into the metrics category just because Google does when you do searches for good metrics. Another one is evaluate the effectiveness and controls of your controls and your staff. So maybe a lot of times you're looking to say, are my security controls working? Am I getting my money out of them? A lot of times what people miss are my staff, are my process and procedures effective? How do you test that? How do you get metrics on that? Well, you do exercises, you do, you look at your SOAR and say, how many times did somebody deviate from a process? Why? Is it because they don't have enough training? Is it because the playbook needs to be rewritten? Those things drive action. Anyway, start at the beginning, goals you're trying to achieve. A lot of times the most important is the bottom. We need money. We have to prove that we're doing the best that we can, and here's how much risk we're reducing, but if we just had $1 gazillion more, we could reduce the risk even more. So, think about what goals you're trying to achieve with your metrics. But what about maturity?
Of course, maturity. So if we're keeping score today, 3 times at least in this presentation, I'm going to say things that are very counter to my role at Mandiant. And largely, perhaps not the best for my professional position. I'm in a team that helps develop methodologies that leverage maturity scoring on a regular basis. We develop assessments, we deliver maturity scores frequently. And so now I'm going to spend some time talking to you about why I hate maturity scores.
My favorite.
Yeah, boy. So first of all, it's really misleading. There are times it gets used to say, oh, if I have more tech, I'm more mature. This is not really how most maturity standards are written, not really the intention of it. By the way, I should probably, in trying to save my career, point out there is a very valid and useful way to use maturity scores. Unfortunately, that is not the most common way they're used. Having more rules in your firewall or more use cases in your SIM, this does not make you more mature. Even hitting some of those great things we all aspire to with threat hunting and data science and machine learning, that might be an indicator of maturity, but really maturity is focused on the process. And to that point, one of the fallacies about how maturity gets used is it doesn't even necessarily suggest the process is aligned to the problem. And what I mean by that is, while it's important to have a mature organization that can optimize, that can measure how well they do something, it doesn't take into account, if I had an entire process, the best process for password management in the world, I do all the things. I enforce password complexity. It's ridiculously 30 characters with upper and lower case, symbols, and even we've added emoji to the requirement now. Great, that's super complex, that's hard. We change it every 30 days. We have things that account for if something hasn't been changed, it alerts us. All these sorts of things. It's a very mature process. But, go back to the point earlier, I still lack MFA. It doesn't help if my threat actor is doing things to do like Kerberoasting or other techniques that aren't brute forcing that password. So the process not being aligned to the control or the problem, maturity is never going to point out to you. You could be a level 5 optimized, highly invested organization and still have a critical problem. The other is there's sort of something lost frequently when we talk about maturity. We all sort of co-opt this term. We've leveraged it from CMMI, Prisma, COBIT, whomever. We sort of forget that it's capability and maturity. And the scales are even different. The first order scale is capability. It's a 0 to 4 typically. Maturity is the second factor of that, which is the typical 1 to 5 initial through optimizing. So maturity is really important. It's great at measuring some progress. People should not be striving for 5 across the board. I'm sure most people know that. It's also okay to be at a 3, have done tons of investment, and still be at a 3 maturity. But it's good for looking at a security program. It is not necessarily good for identifying what your actual capability against your threats are. And it's frequently misused for that. And so while not technically a metric, it got an honorable mention here. And if you are using it as a metric, it's probably not a great one.
Yeah, it's not driving immediate change. I used to do security assessments and work in a group that did 150 of them. And we used CMMI, 1 through 5. And every organization says, I want to be a 5. And we would say, no, you don't. We are not building bridges. We do not need repeatable processes to the point of moving this by an inch, put this flag in the ground, the concrete needs to be this thick. We work in a very rapidly changing environment. While things need to be documented, they do need to be repeatable. They do not need to be set in stone and immovable. They need to be able to change. So we would say, oh, you need to be a 3. And they said, well, I'm definitely a 3. And it's like, yeah, you're like barely a 1. But
well, that's the other thing. It's often really very self-inflated when people...
When they do self-assess.
Yeah.
And it's very heartbreaking when they get their 1. And we have to remind them, do not take it personally. This is, the first step on your journey. Good metrics gone bad. So what is kind of the root of these bad metrics? If there's no consumer, so you spend 5 hours creating this thing, nobody's going to use it. You need to have a consumer. Who's going to use it? How are they going to use it? Why are they going to use it? And do they have time to use it? Okay, if you're reporting on, hey, IT team, it's taking you this long to do your patch management. You're not getting your critical vulnerabilities patched. And they're like, yep. Okay. So you spend it, figure out, is the time worth it to gather that metric? If you have no consumer who's going to be able to act on it. Another thing is headline response. And by this, we mean Log4j, Microsoft Exchange, the sky is falling sorts of things. You can't just pull metrics because of the headlines. You need to use the threat intelligence to figure out, is this relevant? Is somebody actually going to exploit it, or is it more academic? So, bring your threat intelligence in before you have to jump to say, oh my God, what's happening with this latest Microsoft whatever.
Yeah, arguably you could run into the situation where even like the headline response isn't capable of having a true metric. You might have a measurement, you might have something you can report, but from a metric standpoint, there may be very little you can do. The next two to talk about are metrics in isolation and industry benchmarking. One of these two is the second item where I try to commit professional suicide here. So let's talk about the benchmarking fallacy. Almost everyone wants to know how well they do something, whether it's how well you perform in athletics, whether it's how well you perform in industry, whether it's how well you perform in academics. It's very hard to not want to know how you compare to your peers. That's natural, it makes sense. Unfortunately, with that comes a bit of a fallacy in the way benchmarking works. Benchmarking has value. Benchmarking is useful from a legal standpoint sometimes if you're trying to prove reasonableness, like all the legislation requires, which is, by the way, one of the most annoying ways, laws are written, which is to say reasonable. I once talked to an attorney one time, how do you define reasonable? He said, John, the way I do it is if I can say it in a room full of people and they don't all laugh at me like I'm an idiot, it was reasonable. Well, so for that reason, benchmarking has value, but often it's misinterpreted and people start to think it's the old bear scenario. And what I mean by that is if a bear comes into the room, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun the slowest person in this room, which I may not be able to do. But at least I got a shot because I'm not outrunning the bear. Unfortunately, when we talk about threat actors, it's much more like this shark looking at your industry. And it may take the whole industry at once, or it may take the person in the middle, or the side, or the left, or the right. There's no good indicator to suggest at this point that threat actors are truly just picking off the bottom line of maturity. Oftentimes, you may be more mature, but also have a whole lot more money, which could be a real incentive, or the data they want specifically. And so, even if you're more mature, or even more useful than maturity, as we just talked about, maybe you actually have better defenses and better metrics that would show those defenses, but doesn't mean that's what the threat actor is going to focus on.
Well, and one of the things I work on this last year is pulling together M-trends. And one of the biggest feedback we continually get is, give us more industry data. We want more industry comparison. And that's really hard across all of the organizations in cybersecurity, because we don't see all things. One organization sees this, Mandiant sees this, Google sees this, Verizon sees this, CrowdStrike sees this. We don't have something across the entire industry. There's also a ton of mom and pop shops that are getting hacked. None of us are responding to those, so we don't know. The other thing is, if you're comparing industries, it's like, oh my gosh, healthcare is getting hammered with ransomware. However, what if it's the HR system that's getting hammered with ransomware? Well, guess what kind of industries have HR systems? So industry comparisons are very, very hard. The other thing I wanted to mention is when I used to do the SOC assessments, everybody wanted to know, well, what's my competitor right over there doing? We couldn't give them the information, but I assured them that none of them were doing as well as they thought they were, no matter what industry.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to pick on healthcare briefly on that, and I had thought better of it, but I'll go ahead. It's a really good example. I come from a healthcare background. Doing an industry benchmark in an industry that's historically known not to be particularly good at something, I don't know what that proves. I'm the fastest of the slow people. I'm the smartest of the not so smart. I'm the best looking of the not so good looking. Like, I don't want to be benchmarked against that. I want to figure out how I stack up in the rest of the world. So, yeah.
Even size of organization.
Sure.
How much money do you have? People are going to go after you, but if you're, mid-sized organization, you don't want to be compared to the gigantic healthcare organizations of the world.
And if you want to make your consultants happy, try not to make them try to figure out like, well, I want to be compared against something about my size, maybe slightly smaller, with, kind of a leaning to the left, like, no, we don't have that level of specificity either. And so people who say they do probably don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Sometimes metrics go too far. Earlier we mentioned mean time to remediate. We could also talk about mean time to respond, mean time to detect. And as I said, early on, one of the first things I got exposed to Kerry with was she was doing a presentation at RSA, and she was making a comment about mean time to remediate, I believe you said it was. You reminded me. I thought it was detect, but and how that's a flawed measurement or flawed metric.
No, actually, I said MTTR sucks.
Sure, yeah. Which, by the way, we got into this together because we both agreed metrics are BS, I think, was part of the starting point of this whole theory. But so I challenged that. And ultimately, she was right. But the reason I challenged it is because a measurement or a metric in isolation may not tell the whole story. If we take something like the way the physical security industry looks at a security system, and this applies remarkably well to cyber, physical, just about anything, if you consider how long an adversary takes to complete their mission, from deciding they want to do it, whether it's destruction, theft, whatever, there's a task time required. What you really want to do is ensure your detection capability and your response capability, response being a response with force capable to disrupt their attack, is faster than the amount of delay you've been able to add to the system. Delay is prevention, except with the attitude of all prevention will eventually fail. So if you start to break these down in terms of time, I can take all the prevention in the world I've bought, start to look at how long it takes me to detect and how long it takes me to respond with adequate force to disrupt this attack, and see if that is faster than the adversary time, which I think is a phenomenal way to measure this. However, you would have to know how long does it take the adversary or my red team to complete their mission, how much delay have I built in, what's my detection time, and what's my response time with the force capable of disrupting or containing the event. Almost no one that I've met can do this. So while academically I love this, and the physical security people do a really good job of it, and I drive this towards, when we develop SOCs and cyber defense centers, we drive towards this capability. If all you're doing is reporting mean time to detect, or all you're doing is mean time to respond, you probably have a measurement that's not particularly useful.
I'll hold my further comments on MTTR. I'll wait.
I was agreeing with you.
I know.
I can't agree more. So one other thing to consider is if you have something like mean time to detect or any of these measurements, they have an impact. Instead of the standard Sun Tzu quote or Zen in the art of motorcycle repair or all the other things as a security practitioner I'm supposed to do, I'm going to bring two other esoteric reference points. One is the observer's effect. And this is sort of borderline Schrodinger's cat, so I feel like I'm still in the right realm of my profession to co-opt something smarter than me. This is the idea that anytime you take a measurement, you're going to affect the object measured, or the disturbance of a system will be disturbed by the act of observation. So there's no way to continually measure something and not have it impact it. The better example of this in my mind is Goodhart's Law. And someone already knows or will Google and discover that Goodhart's Law is probably actually misnamed. You can find, if you follow the literary sources enough, it actually goes back to someone else. But no one remembers that. We're sticking with Goodhart's Law. And that is, when a measure becomes the target, it ceases to be a good measure. And we gave credit to the folks that wrote this little sketch, and I like it. If you measure people on number of nails, you might get 1 million tiny nails. If you measure people on the weight of nails, you might get 3 that are gigantic and heavy. If you start measuring your SOC on cases closed, they might not actually investigate. They might just start closing cases. If you measure mean time to detect, they might just acknowledge those cases immediately and do nothing with them. So you have to consider fast forward the metric to the outcome it will drive, keeping these items in mind.
Yeah, and oftentimes they drive unexpected behavior. So if you're saying, we're going to do mean time to resolution. I just want to close the ticket. Okay, well, I can close the ticket. I mean, I don't care what it is. I can rush the investigation. I can get the ticket done so that I get credit for it, so that number goes down, so we look better. We're showing the executive team exactly what they want to see. Great. You did not improve the business at all. Oftentimes when this is the case, there's ignored alerts, there's rushed investigations, and never is there enough time to feed back into the system. So one of the most critical things we can do in a SOC is to take what we've learned and build it back into our systems, our processes, our automation. If you're measuring people on how quickly they can close tickets, that is not going to happen, I guarantee it. So you're driving the wrong behavior. The other is saying, well, John closed 15 tickets yesterday and you only closed 10. Well, he's cherry picking. He's taking the easy ones. Of course he's closing more.
It's just smart.
Right. So, comparing or saying, using just, the number of things that were done and trying to create a competitive environment is terrible. That's not what you want. You don't want cherry picking. You want people to focus on the right things, solving the right problems, improving the business. Another thing that kind of goes back to the story I was talking to about a SIM and onboarding, 40 different feeds, telemetry, et cetera. I'm sure the implementation team was patting themselves on the back. Nobody ever thought about what would happen to the analyst at the end of that. So you got this new great piece of telemetry, a new feed going into your SOC. Awesome, pat yourself on the back. Guess what? That analyst has no idea what to do with that new feed. You did not train them. All of a sudden, your time to close tickets goes up. Oh no, what have we done? We added this feed, it was terrible. No, you just didn't focus on putting the right training in place, making sure the analysts are prepared, making sure that they have enough time to deal with something new, which, by the way, you're going to need to definitely look at that before you're bringing new feeds in and expecting this person who's already rushing to close tickets to rush more with more information. So the outcome is not necessarily what you thought it was going to be. Pat yourself on the back, 1 million feeds into your SIM. Did you improve the business? Maybe not. One other thing here is, let me go back to this little rant.
Yeah. It's the polar bear.
Right, it's the polar bear. When we praise people for being those heroes in our SOC, this is actually a really bad thing. You do not want to have heroes in your SOC. But they saved the day. We were under this massive ransomware threat, and they saved the day. And oh my gosh, we're fine now because we have this hero. What happens when that hero gets sick, wins the lottery, which does happen, by the way? I worked with an organization whose SOC team won the lottery. They did like a group poll, and they all quit. No shit, this happened.
That's awesome.
Right.
My example of that story is they had an incident and about half of them quit within 24 hours of having activated.
Excellent.
It's sort of the opposite of winning the lottery, but had the same result.
Same result. So, your heroes are going to leave. You want to make sure that you can sustain. You have that resiliency in your people, not just your resiliency in your systems. Anyway, that was just my little side rant on making sure that you're driving the right behavior. So wait, I'm going to set this one up. Now that we've complained about all the metrics in the world and said, here's the improper things, this is when I get to say, John, fix it.
Right. And if you look at this very long, you'll realize my fix it is pretty dynamic. This is nowhere near perfect, but it's an example of something you can do to try to evaluate your metrics. Make up your own way, come up with the scoring mechanism. But some things that, when we were going through this, we started to try to quantify that we could present. Come up with a scorecard. First, make compound metrics. Include quality and quantity simultaneously in the same metric. If all you do is focus on one, you will likely miss the other and present a problem. If you think about it from the engineering triangle, you can have good, fast, cheap, pick two. Obviously, I bias towards those two, but if you only measure one, you're likely not getting either of the other two, and you want to at least get two of the three.
You guys follow that too? Yeah, go.
Sorry. Yeah. So make compound metrics. How much do I do and how well did I do it, as opposed to just how much or how well. If I do great quality, but I can't meet the quantity demands, I'm failing. If I do tons of quantity, but I fail to meet the quality demands, I'm equally failing. Another one, and this is one that I point out a lot, which is, does the frequency in which you collect the metric and distribute it match the frequency in which you will take action? And the way I like to think of it is, imagine you get this metric automated to the point it's being sent to people's inbox. It's a mail message. How many of them are setting up rules to send it to a folder they never look at, versus something that if it's sent to them weekly, on Friday they get the metric and they're going to do something about it by Monday or Tuesday, so that when you send it to them again on Friday, they're going to do the same thing next week. If the frequency doesn't match the collection and delivery, you're losing points. So if it's a compound metric and your collection matches the frequency of action, now you're getting points. And we all like points. Now, you can start to lose some points here. How far away from the person taking the action is the metric being delivered? And what I mean by how far away is, if I'm delivering a budget metric to the shift manager of a SOC, that's probably the wrong place. It's got to then go several layers of the organization, up, left, right. You can figure out how you want to do layers in your own org charts, but you lose points for each step. Similarly, my CISO probably doesn't really care specifically about how many cases we closed. I hope not, anyway. And so again, that was too high. You need to bring that metric down for it to be useful. Does the metric clearly define the objective? Ideally, this should be pretty obvious from reading it, but sometimes it's not. And if it doesn't clearly define the objective, make sure and go back and look to see if you can figure it out. Maybe it doesn't have a good objective, or maybe back to the previous slide, if you fast forward, it's going to drive something you don't want. The next one is sort of the standard golden rule of security: don't spend more on something than it's worth. That is also true here. Can the cost to produce the metric be quantified? You should know what it costs to produce a metric. You don't want to take up your valuable SOC resource. You want actually doing incident response and malware reverse engineering, taking all their time to produce a metric that doesn't actually add much value. So those two go together. What's the cost to produce it? And is the cost to produce it more than the actual value it derives? And then lastly, the point is you lose points if it actually drives bad behavior. And then ultimately, you come up with a rubric and start to say, hey, this is a great metric, this is a good metric, this is a terrible metric, and move from there. And we're going to go to an example. So one of the examples that came up was event analyst per hour. Now, I can only assume event analyst per hour is largely to try to figure out some sort of performance. How's my staff performing? Does it meet quality and quantity measures? No, not really. So I'm going to give 0 points on that one, probably. Does the frequency of collection and distribution match the frequency of action? Well, first of all, it doesn't specifically say what the frequency of collection is, but in almost any scenario, you're going to have a problem, which is my events are going to change radically given what's going on. And so what would the periodicity be that would make this good? And I struggle to find it. Is it weekly, monthly, quarterly? When does this actually work well? Events per analyst hour seems like a real problem. Also keeping in mind, easy events take less. Important events might take more. So I'm going 0. 0?
0.
0, okay. How many degrees of separation is this metric from the action? Not clearly identified, even in my own example. But we'll pretend it doesn't have too much problem there. Does it drive improved or maintained quality? I would say probably not. If I know I'm being graded on how many events I handle an hour, I'm going to go back to that cherry picking model where I get to close 15 and my neighbor closes 5, I'm going to start doing things, transfer things to the other teams, turf it, do what I got to do, and also just close the heck out of these things once I get even the slightest indication. Oh, that's just pup, move on, you know. Whatever it is, I'm going to try to get through it as quick as possible. Not because I'm a jerk, well, I might be, but mostly because I know I'm getting graded on it, and we all have some incentive based on this grading. And then, does it drive behavior counter to other corporate metrics or missions? And I think this one clearly does. And so, didn't add it all up, but you can see pretty quickly here how I can take what sounds like a good metric. It sounds like a decent performance metric. I want more staff. I want to determine if my staff is performing. Maybe I have a bunch of lazy guys like me that sit around and drink coffee all day and don't get a lot of work done. Maybe this will help me determine that. But ultimately, the measurement here or the metric here isn't driving that goal.
And also something to note is that this is for your organization. Everyone's organization is different. And so it may be, wow, this is super important to me, or man, my events per analyst hour are 1,000. Obviously, that's not sustainable. So it kind of depends, you know. It depends is the crappiest consulting answer ever, but there it is.
That's the one I always give.
There you go. All right, so what are the takeaways that make it actionable? So the things that we went over today, what are you trying to achieve? If it's risk and compliance, can't do a whole lot to change what they want you to report on. But what other goals do you want to achieve? Make sure that your metrics are aligned to that. Get buy-in from the executives on the intent. Change is hard, change is scary. If you're going to change the metrics that you're giving to executives or your leadership, make sure they understand why. You know, this isn't like a finance report that's going to be the same decade after decade after decade. When you introduce change, make sure that they understand why before you just say, here's my new report, this is great, and they say, change, okay? Then audit your current metrics, answer the questions. Is there a consumer? Are they ready for the information? Does the metric actually drive change, or is it a great 20,000 alerts?
So what?
So what? How often will the metrics need to be gathered? What's the cost and effort? Kind of fill out the spreadsheet that you put together. And then does the metric require accompanying information? Because there's nothing, wow, out of words. There's
okay, we're almost done.
Nothing worse than presenting a metric and then somebody asking a question, you being the deer in headlights, being like, I'll have to get back to you. Yeah. And then, of course, update your metrics. Yeah. Let us know how it worked. And
for update, I want to add one more thing. Obviously, board metrics are harder to change, but I would also encourage modulating your metrics. If we consider that measurement affects the system, we consider that oftentimes metrics will drive the wrong behavior. Update your metrics to ensure that they change over time and don't stay the same. Security changes, your metrics should change, your goals should change.
Yeah, it looks like we're out of time, but thank you guys for joining us. And if you have any recommendations for the next argument you guys would like us to go through and then present our findings at the next event, let us know. So, thank you.